Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and today we are going to have a look into the new flight model of the Fenix version 2 Block 1 update. I'm running version number 200 right now, and to give you a little bit of an idea about the setup that I'm running, let's have a look. I've selected the clear skies weather scenario, and my turbulence settings are currently set to low, which is as expected, or rather as recommended by Fenix, so you have it down here. And that is the basis on which we are going to run the test flight today. So, our gross weight is 60.6 tons, and you can have a look into the entire setup down here. Let's reload those 5 tons of fuel that I originally had and that I calculated my takeoff data for. So we are taking off with a gross weight just above 60 tons. The reason we're doing it is because we will get a lot of performance information for exactly 60 tons from the Airbus manuals, so we are going to use that during the course of our flight. Takeoff data is calculated by the Fenix EFB, and we just about got to make sure the airplane is trimmed correctly. So let's have a quick look onto the flight control page. So that's 0.5 down, exactly as the EFB has calculated for us. Okay, perfect. So that is our basic setup for our flight. Now, the idea today is to take this one airborne and fly a Patron around Düsseldorf. En route, we are going to do a little bit of stuff like checking the flight dynamics, checking the pitch and power values, and everything the likes. So that is basically going to be exactly what we need in order to determine how the Fenix A320v2 flies. Okay, so very much excited for this. And just before we take off, a little bit of basic information for you right here. So, most of the pitch and power values we're going to use in the flight today are taken straight from the Flight with Unreliable Airspeed non-normal checklist in the QRH. And in there you can basically find everything like pitch and power values, resultant speed values, and so on. So a little bit of stuff here for the takeoff. As you know, in the A320, the flight director comes up automatically in takeoff, so we are initially going to use it, but then we'll go according to the unreliable speed memory items. So that is below the thrust reduction altitude, 15 degrees of pitch with takeoff thrust, then above thrust reduction altitude, below level 100, 10 degrees of pitch and climb thrust. We are going to climb up a little bit, see how it behaves, and then we are going to level off, and from there on we are going to use the pitch and power tables to see how the airplane is going to perform, and we are going to do a little bit of hand flying, see how it handles in normal conditions, explore a couple of the protections, seeing that the fly-by-wire is labeled V2 from Fenix as well. So we are going to explore protections, we're going to explore how the airplane behaves. And that is basically our setup and plan for the flight today. I have no idea how long this video is going to get, but I expect it is not going to be a quick 10-minute video. Alright then, so that is all our setup completed, so let's go ahead and release the park and brake, and then we are ready to go. And I did not mean to trim there. Alright, I will zoom in a little bit for you so that you can better read the displays. I know there's a little bit of a problem there on my 42-inch monitor, but the setup like we have it right now should be roundabout appropriate. I did try to pop the displays out for you, but unfortunately Microsoft Flight Simulator has the lovely tendency to freeze them, and for that reason you couldn't really see anything when I popped them out, so I did experiment with that, but, well, welcome to the world of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Alright then, ready to go? Take off! So, half stick down, with tailwind it would be full stick down. Manflex 68, SS runway, auto thrust blue. So, rotation technique. We will take the little pointer of the side stick down there on primary flight display and put it onto the 7.5 degree pitch mark. And that should roughly give us 3 degree per second rotation rate, which is what Airbus wants us to use. So let's see how that's going to work. V1, rotate, 7.5. That's okay. Okay, positive climb, gear up. Okay, let's give it 15 degrees of pitch. Flat director can go off and off. Come on, I said 15 degrees of pitch. Please hold that. Alright, that's better. 15 degrees. And that is pretty much what we need. Okay, so initially we're just going to climb straight ahead. And at the acceleration altitude, which is roughly 1800 feet today, we are going to pitch down to 10 degrees. We'll start accelerating, clean the airplane up, and then we're going to level it off at an altitude of 5000 feet. So, pitch down, auto thrust off, climb thrust set, 10 degrees of pitch. Let's go ahead and establish the climb. So on the initial rotation, I released the stick at roughly 15 degrees of pitch, but it overshot to something like 22. I do have a feeling that it got very, very sensitive there. Probably a little bit more than it should, but let's see during the entire rest of the flight how it's going to perform. Okay, flap 0. Speed checked, flaps 0. Okay, let's start a right-hand turn so that we remain within German airspace. I'm just using a very tiny bit of side stick input. Let me show it to you over here, like so. And that gives me a nice rotation rate, and that is pretty much what I would expect the airplane to do as well. So, very good job on that side. Okay, let's return to 10 degrees of pitch now. You can see my side stick inputs, you can see how small they are, just something like that. And you're already getting a good response of the airplane. And that is exactly what the fly-by-wire aircraft should do. So, before going into all of the stuff of how the airplane handles, let's take a quick second to talk about how it should handle. Basically, with the Airbus fly-by-wire logic, what you're doing when you're moving your side stick is you are not commanding an elevator input, but rather you're commanding a G-loading in terms of the pitch axis and a roll rate in terms of the roll axis. So let's go ahead and level off down here. That might have been a little bit fast there, seeing the tiny amount of stick input I gave. So if you now say that you can barely see my side stick moving, then that is actually correct, because I am barely moving it, because you don't need to in an Airbus. So that's correct behavior. Okay then. So, if I'm using just a tiny bit of stick up, then we will get a certain G-loading, and basically to every stick setting there is a corresponding G-loading in normal law and normal flight. And I'm going to show you that right now. So let's use a little bit of stick up there, and you will see how the airplane is going to react to that. That was quite a quick pitch up already. For my taste, maybe a little bit too much. But let's go ahead and experiment a little bit with it. So on the econ down here, you've got your G-loading indicated. And now I'm going to pitch up and down a little bit. Let's get rid of that. Thank you very much. So I'm going to pitch up and down a little bit, and let's see what kind of G-loadings we can get from the airplane. So we are rather close to the green dot. I'll start with a pitch down. I'll use full stick down, and it shouldn't exceed 1 G downwards. Okay, stick us in. And you didn't really even see anything. Let's do a full up now. Should be 2.5 Gs maximum. And you can see we're getting 2.4 consistent there. Okay, toggle lock, we don't need you, thanks. Let's bring it back down. Give me a bit of thrust. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of maneuvering now. Let's go ahead and establish at 6,000 feet, speed 250 knots, and that should be something in the region about 60% N1. Okay, here we go. Then let's do a little bit of basic Airbus maneuvering. We're going to start a right-hand turn, 15 degrees, and we are going to establish a rate of climb of 500 feet a minute. Once we're established in that climb and turn, the plane basically shouldn't need any more input at all from us and simply maintain what it has. So let's make sure we've got a stable speed. Let's quickly match the heading book so that we can see where we are. Okay, we're going to start off on a heading of 330. So let's quickly establish on that. And here we go. Okay, let's start with our maneuvering. Approximately 1 degree nose up pitch, 15 degrees of bank, and then within a time period of about 1 minute, we should do a nice 90-degree turn and climb by 500 feet. Right, 3, 2, 1, start. So I'm not touching the side stick at all anymore. You can see it, my stick is completely untouched, and the Airbus should perfectly maintain that. I'm just quickly going to adjust to 500 feet a minute. You can see I'm doing very minor inputs, and the plane is nicely maintaining what I've commanded. Good. And that is exactly what it should do. Now it becomes interesting once you start inserting disturbances like turbulence. But we are not even going to talk about that in this video, because we first of all want to check the basics. Right, let's go to the rose mode. And here we are. Okay. So let's do the same the other way around. Let's go into a descent, 15 degrees angular bank to the other side. That has been a bit too much. And we're just going to establish on that. You can see on my side stick down there that I'm using minimal inputs in order to control the plane. And that is exactly how it should be. Okay, 15 degrees. And look at that, it's perfectly maintaining the attitude. So now we're going to do another test. Let's just about roll out on a northerly heading there. And at an altitude of 6,000. This time we're going to start accelerating and decelerating. Okay, so wings level, we'll bring it down to 6,000, level off over there. And then we're going to try to start changing our speed. Now, the 1G flight path of the Airbus is basically going to maintain that G loading. In other words, it is going to correct for any of the disturbances caused by the increase and decrease of thrust, but it is not going to correct for the increase in lift. So have a very close look at the PFD. I'm going to MCT now. Okay, that's MCT set. You can see the pitch is maintained perfectly, but it starts a very slow climb as we start accelerating, since our wings are now generating more lift. Okay, you get a tiny pitch down moment, but the vertical speed is just a few hundred feet a minute. Very nice. That is exactly what I expect the airplane to do. Okay, 340 knots, let's maintain that. Okay, and here we are. Okay, very nice. This is exactly what I would have expected the plane to do. It pitched down a little bit, because a constant climb would mean increased G loading. So now let's do the same the other way around. I've gone to idle thrust now. And I'm not touching the side stick. My hands are half a meter away from the side stick. So we'll see the airplane pitch up a little bit again. And it should enter a very, very shallow descent. You can somewhat see it on the vertical speed indicator over there. Okay, you can see vertical speed almost 0. I would expect a very shallow descent, but you can see how it is automatically pitching up in order to correct. Okay, it should not start a climb though. Please do not start a climb. If you saw this the opposite way around on the vertical speed indicator, I would say it's perfect. But like this, you know, it's doing maybe 100 feet a minute. So that is, for flight simulation, perfectly fine. For flight simulation, that is all we need. Okay, now let's have a look into how the airplane rolls. So I'm not going to, or at least I will try not to touch the elevator axis. This sometimes is a little bit hard in the simulator, so if I do an accidental elevator input, I do apologize in advance, it is not intended. Basically, when we are rolling the airplane, it should apply a little bit of pitch in order to more or less maintain the altitude. It is going to start a very slight climb or descent, that is expected, but overall, we are again only talking like 100 or 200 feet a minute over here. Once again, I cannot assure that this maneuver is working correctly because of the way how our sticks in flight simulation work. I can't assure that I'm not going to briefly touch the elevator axis. But let's give it a try, let's see. So this is bank only. This is certainly bank only. Let's roll it and you will see it raising the nose a little bit. See that? Let's go 30 degrees. Here we go. So that's quite expected. The nose came up a little bit. The plane is climbing a very tiny bit, but only a very tiny bit. Now let's do the same into the opposite direction. So you can see the nose coming down a tiny bit, and now it should be coming up a bit again, and indeed it does. So that's exactly what I expect the airplane to do. Okay, very nice. So that is much improved from the previous version, where the airplane would be pitching all about. So that is much improved. Very nice to see that. Okay then, probably applied a little bit of elevator just there, so that doesn't count for our test anymore. Okay then, let's go ahead and see how the protections are going to work. I'm going all the way into idle thrust right now. I've taken my hands off the side stick. We will see the nose slowly coming up, and it will be coming up and up and up until eventually we reach the alpha protection speeds. So, a little bit of theory on the Airbus speed indicator there. The upper band over here we've got is VLS. That's the lowest selectable, that is no kind of protection. You can fly in there manually. Auto thrust is going to make a stop at the top of the VLS. Below that, we've got Alpha Prot. In there, the Airbus is automatically going to take the nose down in order to stay outside of the Alpha protection range, but the pilot can override it with a side stick input. And then we've got Alpha Max down here, and that is where the Airbus will take the nose down no matter what you do, in order to avoid going into the stall after that. So, into Alpha Prot, you can see the nose coming down, and it will basically stabilize at the top of the Alpha protection. Or so it should. This is maybe a little bit too much nose down, but it's raising it slowly. And we are just about at the top of Alpha Prot. Okay, very nice. So, my hands are completely off the side stick. And it will basically stabilize at the top of the speed over there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we can override those protections while we're within the Alpha Prot range. No longer from Alpha Max, but in here we can. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm applying a little bit of aft side stick now. Let me show you that again. Okay, here you go. So now I'm using a little bit of aft side stick, and with that I'm able to fly it into the Alpha Prot range. And you can see, as long as I keep my side stick to the back, I'm able to fly it in here. Now let's go to Alpha Max. In there the plane is going to take the nose down whatever we do. So I'm just maintaining the pitch. And you can see I'm slowly going further aft on the side stick, because the closer we get, and well, that alpha floor is activating a little bit early. Clicking that away with the auto thrust disconnect button. Okay, here we are. Nice. So my side stick is full aft at the moment, and the plane is maintaining Alpha Max. Very good. And that is how you can fly as slow as possible in the A320. So my side stick is just full aft at the moment. And we can see the plane doing a little bit of pumping here in the pitch, a little bit up and down. The real one wouldn't do that, it would stabilize a little bit better. But overall, it is doing pretty much what I would expect it to do. Now here comes the fun. If you're sitting in that Airbus simulator, you can now use your thrust in order to maintain altitude while maintaining Alpha Max. So let me put in a little bit of thrust. And we can use that to arrest the descent rate. So look at that. Now the pitch is coming up a bit. My side stick is full aft the entire time. I'm not doing anything else. Now we can basically adjust the thrust in order to maintain our, or in order to control our vertical speed like that. Of course, that is nothing you would ever consider doing on the line, but... Okay, left side stick fault, calibrate null zones. Well, we're gonna ignore that for now. You can see how we can basically fly it on the thrust right now. That is quite cool, and that's quite cool of an exercise you can do in the full flight simulator as well. And the full flight doesn't do the pumping up and down in the pitch, so the full flight is smoother than that. But seeing that we're talking about flight simulation add-on over here, that is actually quite cool. Okay, now let's try to trick it. Pulling thrust all the way into idle, my side stick remains full aft. It's going a little bit too far into the red band for my taste. But then again, it's recovering nicely and slowly. That's quite cool. Okay, now let's add a little bit of bank angle to this. I'm going full side stick to the right now. We will need a little bit thrust in order not to lose altitude. And it should protect us at 45 degrees angle of bank. And you can see that is basically what it's aiming to do. It's definitely getting a little bit too fast right now. It should stay close to the alpha max, so to the red point. But here we go. Yeah, this is overprotecting it a little bit. And the speed is definitely becoming too low right now. But overall, it's not as accurate as the full flight. But then again, we're talking about a flight simulator add-on. And you can see how it's now stabilizing back onto alpha max. Okay, very cool. Again, clicking that alpha floor away. So, that is quite cool indeed. Then, I'm just releasing my side stick now, and the airplane is going to return itself into normal flight. 30 degrees of bank. Cool. Okay, so, taking over manually again now. Let's give it a little bit of thrust to get back out of this. So, first impression of the low speed protection. Not exactly perfect, but for flight simulator, really good. For flight simulator, that is really, really good, I have to say. Okay then, let's fly a little bit back towards the airport, and now we're going to have a look into the bank angle and how the bank angle and the rolling moments work, and then we're going to have a look into the overspeed, and after that we are basically done with the fly-by-wire part of things until we start our approach, and then we can have a look into the flight model and the pitch and power values created by the aircraft. So that's going to be the next interesting thing then. Okay, in the meantime, very quick look over here, seeing that we don't fly away too much. Let's set course back to the airport. Give me a direct to Bravo Oscar Tango. Here we go. Alright, cool. So, let's climb back to an altitude of... actually, you know what? Let's climb to an altitude of 10,000 feet. Because we will need a little bit of room below us for the maneuvers that I intend to do next. Okay, so let's done that. And I cross-check, passing flight level 60 now. Checked. Okay, so 10 degrees of pitch, climb thrust. That is basically what we have right now. And the speed, nicely around 250 knots, as I would expect it to be. But we'll have a look into those numbers a little bit later into the video when we go about the pitch and power values. So for now, let's climb up to flight level 100, and then we are going to do a couple more exercises to test the overspeed protections. What we can do on the way up already, let's have a look into the bank angle protections. So once again, here's the side stick for you. So, let's go full bank to the left. It will limit us at 67 degrees. As you can see. 67 and no more. Okay, now let's do the same onto the other side. Full input is approximately 4 degrees per second of roll rate. And you can see how it is following that kind of nicely. Okay, tiny overshoot, but that is totally fine. Okay then, releasing the side stick to neutral, and is rolling back to 30 degrees of bank. Tiny bit more in the sim, 33 probably, but that number is fine for me, that counts. Okay, cool. So let's climb to 10,000 now, and then on the way up let's do a little bit of an exercise. So this time, let's see what's going to happen when we apply the rudder pedals. The rudder in an airplane like this is a very, very strong tool, especially at speeds this high. Keep in mind, the rudder is designed to counteract an engine failure at a low speed scenario around V2, and it needs to be able to make you fly straight. So you've got a very, very powerful rudder. Now up at these speeds, we will even have a rudder travel limiter in place. So if we have a look at this, you can see maximum rudder travel is quite limited now. So if I'm doing a full rudder input, then this is all we're getting. This is where it limits us. Okay, so let's take the speed out, going to idle thrust now, and then we're going to have a look into what's going to happen next. So as the speed comes down, the rudder travel limiter is increasing. If you slowly watch it over there, you can see how it's getting wider and wider. So, speed is coming down, 250 knots, we've already got double the range. And I'm just bringing it down a little bit further, let's say to about 220, or something like this. Alright, so, now you can see this is the amount of rudder deflection we have available. What we're going to test now is how the airplane responds to the bank angle when we use rudder input. Now, at this moment, just recall how the fly-by-wire works. The side stick is commanding the roll input. And if you don't command any roll input, then your airplane sees no reason to roll about. However, when you kick the rudder, then basically you can kick it to a certain bank angle with the rudder, and it's going to maintain that bank angle. When you release the rudder, it's going to return to wings level flight, because keep in mind, you did not command any roll rate with the side stick. Okay, ready? Then let's have a look. I'm going full right rudder now. You can see the airplane starts to roll. Okay, this gives us like 8 degrees of bank. That is less than I would have expected. In the A330 you can easily get like 15-20 degrees, but it maintains that steady bank with the full rudder input. You can see the rudder at the limit over there. And you can see how the airplane is automatically applying ailerons and spoilers in order to maintain the attitude as it is. Okay, now I'm taking the rudder out again, and it is going to roll back wings level. Very well done, Fenix. That is how I expect the plane to act. Okay then, let's have a little bit of fun. Now we're going into the overspeed protections. Okay, ready? So, climb thrust. Pitch down. So, side stick is fully down. It's protecting us at 15 degrees nose down. Now let's see what's going to happen when we enter the overspeed range. Okay, it should start pitching up. And it does indeed. And if we just about keep the side stick full down where it is right now, it should allow us only for a speed of overspeed plus 20 knots. And let's go ahead and cancel that, please. Thank you. Okay, so side stick is still all the way down. Now the overspeed itself was probably too much. It would only let you go like 20 or 30 knots into the overspeed. And then it should maintain that when you keep the stick all the way down. So my stick is still all the way forward. And we should be able to maintain overspeed plus 20 knots, so 370 knots with the stick fully forward. So let's see where the plane is going to stabilize. Yeah, looks about right. It is a little bit sluggish to correct that, but overall it looks like it's aiming for the correct number, which is 370 knots. So that's quite alright. Now let's have a look into the bank angle. So I'm going full left side stick now. Let's have a look into what it's going to do now. And 30 degrees is all it will give us. So this one is rolling a tiny bit more, couple degrees, but that's only a few degrees, so we can ignore that for here. Overall, this is exactly what the plane is designed to do. A little bit on the sluggish side, but it is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Alright, cool. So that is the fly-by-wire demo pretty much complete. So let's go ahead and fly a little bit of pitch power. I'm going side neutral, and now it should stabilize at the little equal sign down there. So it should stabilize about 4 knots into the overspeed. So around 354. Let's point it back down manually. So if we do this, it should stabilize round about at 354. You can see it's taking the nose up. Thank you, silence. So take the nose down again, please. Take the nose down again, please. I did not command this. Flight path. Okay, this is a little bit buggy right now. It should lower the nose by itself. I'm not touching the side stick. So once I've flown it into here, it should basically stabilize on here. And not just maintain the pitch. So that's a little bug there. Okay, doesn't matter though. Let's go idle thrust, descend back down to 10,000, and then we'll do a little bit of pitch power flying and see what things are gonna look like over there. So, give me all you've got, please, and I'll take full speed brake as well. Let's see what we can get out of this airplane. Obviously, this is stuff that you would never do with passengers or cabin crew on board. Except for an emergency descent. That is when you might do stuff like this. Okay, that heading I would say is about good. Then let's go to 10,000 feet, stabilize the plane over there. Now just look at that view outside when you're pitching down 10 degrees. That just looks wrong, doesn't it? Okay. So, full side stick up. Give me 2.5 Gs, please. Thank you. So that is looking quite alright. Cool, so let's stabilize on 10,000. So, 10,000 feet and 250 knots, that is what I'm aiming to stabilize on. And then let's have a look into the pitch and power tables to see how the airplane is going to, or how the airplane should fly, and how the airplane does fly. So, now the fly-by-wire test part is completed. The fly-by-wire is behaving as it should. We still have to check the landing law, but that one we do a bit later on. So that's the fly-by-wire test, and I do have to say that in terms of the flight controls and how the airplane responds in normal law, it is actually acting really well, and it is responding the way I would expect it to respond. Okay, now let's have a look if the flight model itself is also correct. The difference between the fly-by-wire and the flight model, for those of you who are not aware, is basically as follows. The fly-by-wire is what commands the airplane how to react to my control inputs. So, for example, what side stick input is going to give me what pitching, what roll rate, and so on. Now the flight model that we're about to check now is things like the relationship between angle of attack, or airspeed, pitch, resultant vertical speed, and the power required in order to maintain those values. So let's have a look into that now. And I'm going to give you a couple of excerpts here from the A320 QRH. And we are going to start with the pitch and power tables that we have over here. So a quick word on how to read them. You've got the pitch and thrust for level off, and then you've got different weights on the top. And as you can see on our ecam, we're at 59 tons of gross weight, so that is pretty much close to 60 tons. And then we've got on the left side the flap configuration, the associated pitch and the thrust required, and the value in the bracket is the resultant speed that we should get. So we're in clean configuration right now. If you go to the lower part of the table, you can see we're in clean configuration and at flight level 100. Now for a gross weight of 60 tons, we should be looking at 60% N1, a pitch of 4 degrees, and that should give us 225 knots. So let's do that. I'm going to help it a little bit over here, so let's go 60% N1, let's set that accurately, like so. Okay, 60% N1, and we want to stabilize at 4 degrees pitch and 225 knots. There is a little note there in the QRH, which I can unfortunately not show you, flying technique to stabilized speed, because stabilized speed is what those values here are basically based upon. And basically it tells us to stabilize the altitude. When altitude is stabilized, if the pitch is above the target pitch, increase the thrust and maintain the altitude. If the pitch is below the target pitch, decrease thrust and maintain the altitude. So far so logical, this is basic flying now. Okay, so our pitch is below the target, so let's stabilize the altitude and go to idle. And the way Airbus wants us to fly this now is when we're stable at flight level 100, then we are going to increase, or we are going to let the speed decrease until our pitch is where it is supposed to be, and that is going to be 4 degrees of pitch. And when that is achieved, we are going to increase thrust to the target, so that's roughly 4 degrees right now. Now we set 60% N1, and that should maintain roughly 225 knots. So now the pitch is a tiny bit higher, we have to fly this really accurately. This is more like 4.5 degrees of pitch. So let's add a tiny bit of power until we are actually at 4 degrees of pitch. So something like this roundabout. Okay, now let's give it 60% N1, and that is what the airplane should fly upon. Okay, that is roughly 60%, and the speed is stable at 225. Let's just level it off. Okay, here we go. So this is quite accurate now. This is pretty much exactly what I'm expecting. 4 degrees pitch, 225 knots, at 60% N1. That is exactly what we should have. So let's give it a little try now, and see how the airplane is going to react to inputs, for example, from flap extension. So if we go a little bit higher up in the table, then you will see that for a flap configuration 1 and 60 tons, we need 56% N1, and that is going to maintain 190 knots at 6.5 degrees of pitch. So let's give this a try now. Flaps 1, speed checked. Flaps 1. So first of all, we do get a very slight rate of climb there. The speed starts dropping, that is expected. So we're looking at a target of 190 knots now with 6.5 degrees of pitch. So let's bring it right there. I'm not touching any controls at all right now. The power is still where I left it, so we're just naturally losing a bit of speed and the pitch is increasing. And this is how you would fly the airplane if your airspeed indicators were unreliable. So we're looking at a target of 56% N1, so let's set that. That is 56%. Like so. And now we're looking at 6.5 degrees of pitch, and the speed should stabilize at 190 knots. So 6.5 degrees pitch is somewhere over here. Just about below the 7.5 mark. And, well, this is a little bit off right now. Let's cross-check. We've got around about 56%. Let's give it a tiny bit more there, just to be sure that we're exactly on target. Like so. Okay, so looking at 6.5 degrees pitch. So now we can see we are flying quite a bit slower than we should. We should do 190 knots. That is the target that we are supposed to have right now. But you can see it is it is in the right direction, but it's 20 knots slower than it should be, indicating that we have more drag than we should. Okay, let's try config 2. This time we're looking at 5.5 degrees pitch, 58%. And that should give us 160 knots. So, flaps 2. Speed check flaps 2. So, looking at 58% and 1. Let's give it 58. Like so. And now we should have 5.5 degrees of pitch, 160 knots. So now we've got a little bit on the slow side, and seeing that we're flying the backside of the power curve, I'm just going to pitch down a bit to pick that speed back up. Okay, 160, that is where we should be. Now let's give it 5.5 degrees of pitch. Pretty much like so. 5.5 degrees. And we should fly. We should not climb at the moment. We should be level. And the speed at 160 knots. So this is like 5.5 degrees. And we're getting a little bit slow here. Thrust is 58% exactly as it should be from the manual. We should have 160 knots. Yeah, this is roundabout right. For the borders that we have and the constraints we have with the Microsoft Flight Simulator, this is definitely alright. Okay, let's do config 3 now. And that is going to give us 60% and 140 knots at 7 degrees pitch. So, flaps 3. Speed check flaps 3. 60% and 1. Pretty much like so. Okay, 60% and 1. So we should be looking at 7 degrees pitch and 140 knots. So you can see there is something wrong over here. You can easily see that. We are 20 knots faster than we should be, but if we're looking at a target pitch of 7 degrees and we're flying 20 knots faster at the target thrust, but 5 degrees lower, that tells us there is something wrong with the pitch over there. Okay, I'm going to pitch up now to bring the speed down to 140. Let's see if we can get the plane into this. So right now we've got a point where there is something wrong with the flight model. So this is 140 knots and we should be at 7 degrees pitch. So round about here. And this should be level flight now. But you can see when we're doing this, we're climbing and we're losing speed. So this is out of place right now. And at least going back to my previous experience creating flight models in Microsoft Flight Simulator, that is something that should be fixable. So there must be something wrong with the drag of the flap 3 position down there. As you can see, I have to fly myself quite a bit into the back of the power curve right now in order to get my airplane into a situation where it is going to maintain the targets. So that is something they need to improve on. Okay, well, that is going to be it for this little table over here. Let's have a look into another one, and this is going to be the descent in clean configuration table. So what we want to get from this is basically this. At 1 degree pitch and idle thrust, we should get about 225 knots. So that way we can test our descent performance. Right, let's give this a try. I'm going to accelerate out of the... I'm quickly going to accelerate out of this and start a turn back to our airport. So, flaps 1. So for flaps 1 the pitch is looking correct, so summarizing what we have just seen, with flaps 1 and 2 our numbers were quite spot on, flaps 3 had much too little of an effect on the required pitch. Okay, so I'm going to go idle thrust now, since we want to start a descent. I'm going to roll wings level at a heading of 250, and then pitch 1 degree should give us 225 knots. So thrust is in idle. Let's go wings level, and then we're looking at a 250 heading. And 1 degree pitch, which is basically what we have just about now. Okay. So that's a little bit too high. 1 degree like this. Okay, and this should give us 225 knots. So the speed is slowly coming up. Let's wait for it to stabilize. And here's the proof, my engines are indeed in idle. So this is alright. I mean, the speed is coming up slightly. Let's see where we go if I indeed give it 225 knots right now. Let's see what the resultant values are going to be. So 225, stabilize on that please. Okay, so we are stable right now. And we have about 0 degrees pitch, so the pitch is off by about 1 degree at the moment. That is totally within the differences that I would accept within Microsoft Flight Simulator. MSFS just is a bit of a problem in these points. So then the next thing I want to play with is 250 knots, because that is where the Fenix previously had far too much drag. At 250 knots, below level 100 and idle thrust, we should be looking at roughly 1,800 feet a minute. So let's see where we are going to end up. So, speed is on the brink of becoming stable. So on my previous full flight video, we got about 2,100, 2,200 feet a minute. And indeed, it looks like when we are stabilized, we get about 2,000. So the target is 1,800. There is a little bit of tweaking they could do here. What I'm a little bit concerned about is the pitch down that we have associated with this. So again, engines are in idle, there is no flaps, the landing gear is up. So I do not believe that we should have a pitch down moment with this. It should be somewhere up here. So that's something a little bit out of place at the 250 knot mark that I do hope they will be able to go into and have a look at. But overall, the numbers that we can see here are quite alright, just to be sure that you don't misinterpret what I'm saying. So overall, the numbers that we're seeing from this airplane are quite alright. There is a little bit of room for improvement, but that room that we see over there is pretty much exactly within what I'm expecting from Microsoft Flight Simulator. So they probably went quite far with what they could do, and the rest is just within the envelope of what Microsoft Flight Simulator simply can't provide. You will find stuff like that, like a degree of inaccuracy in pitch in other aircraft as well, for sure in the 737. So that is alright what they've done here. Okay, let's level off, 250 knots. We should be looking at approximately a bit more than 60% N1 to maintain that. And that is what we have indeed. Alright, cool. Let's start preparing for an ILS approach, runway 23 left, and see how that's going to work out. So, METMA, radial in 052. That's my extended center line, thank you. So, we don't need anything on the RATNAV. Over here we can take Düsseldorf 23 left, like so. Choose flight level above max flight level. Yeah. Forget about that. Okay. So, 1013. Temperature 15 and the wind is calm. Minimums around 340. We'll start with the config 3 approach because the flight with unreliable airspeed tables that we have are made for config 3. You would not fly config full with unreliable airspeed. So that's what the tables are based upon. Also nice to see, we were heads down in the FMS for quite a while now, but you can see the airplane is basically stable, maintaining its flight path now. So what's up next is we are going to do a couple of traffic patterns with approaches in different flap configurations. So I'm going to start by showing you the table of what we're expecting. Again, I'm sure you still remember the table for level flight. So these pitch values are what we're looking out for when we start our configuration for the approach. And then we've got the approach table down here, and this is made for a 3-degree descent path in final approach with config 3 and landing gear extended. And for the 60-ton airplane that we are flying at the moment, we're at 58.8 right now. So for the 60-ton airplane, we're looking at 4 degrees pitch, 50% N1. Now we are a tiny bit below that, so 49% N1 would be acceptable as well. So that is roughly the numbers that we're looking at for the approach. So let's bring it down to 3000 and start preparing for the approach. Yes, cabin pressure, I know that you're unhappy with me. Okay, and that is the table that we're looking at. So do remember those values. 60 tons means 50% N1 and 4 degrees pitch in config 3. So let's do a little bit of the setup stuff up here. That looks good. So that all looks good for the approach. Okay, cool. I'll turn left a little bit now and I'll bring the airplane actively to 3000. And then we are going to intercept a long final so that we've got plenty of time to configure the airplane to fly a stable approach. Exactly as we would do in an airspeed unreliable situation, by the way. Okay, so we are going to fly this as a traffic pattern. That means that we will be doing a touch and go. Config 3 will be our approach configuration, and for the go around we're going to climb to 1500 feet above the field elevation. So that's roughly 1600 feet on the altimeter. Let me quickly pre-select that for you. That's going to make our life a little bit easier. Here we go, 1600, and we're going to maintain config 1 for the approach. Set altimeter 1013, set and checked. Okay, approach checklist, let's see if we forgot anything. Barrel ref, QNH 1013, seatbelts on, minimum. Yeah, that is not shown yet, I do wonder why. Should be close enough for the minimum to be shown. But let's activate the approach phase, then it's probably going to come up. Yep, there it is, min spiral 340. Auto brake, off, engine start select, normal. Approach checklist complete. Okay, so first, let's start establishing ourselves. 16 miles out. For the traffic pattern itself, that's going to be quite easy stuff. Basically 1500 AGL at the flap 1 speed, and that means we have 45 seconds on the downwind, and then later on that's going to give us a nice little pattern. Okay, so level flight config 0 should be 54 knots now, with 5.5 degrees pitch. And sorry, obviously 205 knots at 54% thrust, that is what I meant to say. And you can see that is actually quite spot on. We've got a tiny bit more thrust set right now, about 5 degrees pitch and green dot speed. Very good. So let's go ahead and go to config 1 now. That means 6.5 degrees pitch, 56% N1. So, flaps 1. We'll let the speed come back. Glide slope alive.
2,500.
Checked. Okay, so we're looking at a target of 190 knots right now, 56% N1. So let's check if that is working. Yep, that's alright. So we've got 56% N1, round about 6.5 degrees of pitch and 190 knots. Perfect. So, gear down. Flaps 2. I'm just accelerating this a little bit right now because we are about to capture the glide. And here we are on the glide. So, flaps 3. So, once the speed is down, and only then, we are targeting 4 degrees pitch, 50% N1. And that is what we should get. As you can see from the table, 60 tons, 4 degrees pitch, 50% N1. That is what we should stabilize on. So right now I'm kind of hunting for the glide slope. For that reason we are staying a little bit above the glide. But I am a little bit surprised that even with the gear down, we can only do like 1,000 feet a minute here. And our speed is staying constant. So I would expect, and I'm saying expect over here because I'm not rated on the 320. But I would expect to be able to slow down a little bit better. So we are approaching the glide slope now. 10 knots above the target. So now I would certainly be expecting something like 3 degrees of pitch, maybe 4 degrees of pitch already. So now we're close to the target speed. And this is where the pitch is quite off at the moment. So look at that. Thrust is in idle. Speed is almost constant. And we have like 2 degrees pitch right now to maintain the glide slope. Config 3. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's increase thrust a bit now. So we should be looking at 50% N1. Let's not take too much. 50%. Now our speed should be stable with this, and the pitch should be 4 degrees. Let me take those numbers for a second. So 4 degrees pitch. That is pretty much what we have right now. So this is the target that we should be in. But look at that, the airplane is leveling off. It's not descending. So there is certainly something wrong over here. That is not how it should behave. Okay, well, let's re-establish and then see how much thrust we'll need then.
1,000.
Checked. I'm going a little bit aggressive into the glide slope right now because we are so close to the airport already, and I still want to see how much power we actually will need on the final. But look at that, we are basically in idle thrust right now and it's barely losing any airspeed. That is definitely not correct. So it has much too little drag over here. It almost feels as if the landing gear doesn't have any drag to it. Okay. So let's see, we are almost established again. Let's start over here. So 700 degrees rate of descent, speed is slightly increasing.
100 above.
So we need something like 42% N1. That is definitely too little.
Minimum.
Okay, continue. We are going to land a little bit long. Düsseldorf got the problem with the glide slope being misaligned. I'm going slightly below it right now. Okay.
30.
So pitch up about 2 degrees. And that broke the descent rate there, but
5.
yeah, that was quite floaty. So let's add the thrust back in. Take off. Mantoga SRS door on track, auto thrust blue, rotate. Positive climb. Gear up. Okay, flight director's off. Auto thrust off. Let's turn downwind. And we are going to do the same thing again. Flaps 1. And we will maintain this. Okay, so that was quite a floater, that landing. Let's see if we can improve on that. Road trace is active. Turning downwind now, that's about 0.52 degrees. Like so. Let's also put the bird on. Alright, once we rebeam, we start the timing and we are looking for 45 seconds. The manual flying of the plane feels really good, by the way. The way the airplane responds, you just need minimal inputs, but you can really steer it precisely now. Okay, we're a beam. Timing, 45 seconds. At 35 we'll take flaps 2. So you can see how precisely I can fly the plane now. And that is new with the V2. And that is something that they have greatly improved upon. Look at how precise you can maintain altitude now. Okay, flaps 2. You check, flaps 2. "45 seconds, we start our turn. 25 degrees angle bank. A little bit of pitch up there. Let's do a quick cleanup of the flight plan as well. Okay, that looks good. And we're coming up on the glide slope. Let's start our descent. Gear down. Flaps 3. Alright, let's give it a little bit of a base here. Let's see, where's the airport? Just over there, okay.
1,000.
Checked. So we should intercept the localizer just about at that highway up there. There comes our runway. A little bit of thrust, let's not mess it up. And that looks about right. So let's try the target once more. We are looking for 4 degrees and 50%, but let's use a bit less thrust. As we figured on the last one, we need more like 40% rather than 50. That, by the way, is something that I would expect Fenix to be able to correct. Okay, let's also cancel the glide slope mode, so that on short final I'm going to go under the glide slope a little bit in order to try and make it onto the aiming point. Okay, so again, I'm in idle thrust right now, and it does absolutely not have sufficient drag with this. That is something that they really need to improve. Okay, checked. I'm going below the glide slope on purpose here.
Minimum.
Continue.
200.
So again, at this airport, glide slope and PAPI are off a little bit, so I'm just doing things visually now.
100.
But look at how I don't need any thrust. Okay, now let's concentrate on the flare.
40. 30.
Stick up.
20. Reach up.
2 degrees. Hold. Even climbing away with that. Okay, and we're down. So let's do one more. This time we're gonna go for a flap full landing. Mantoga SRS go around track, auto thrust blue. V1, rotate. By the way, it shouldn't show us V1 and VR, it should only give us the previous approach speed. Okay, positive climb, gear up. So, climb thrust set, let's turn into the downwind. Flaps 1. Okay, 1600 feet. Then, flight directors off. Activate approach phase and direct to Fox India, radial in, insert. Okay, perfect. So that's our setup for the second approach again. Let's turn onto the downwind track, 052. Okay, nice. Manual handling of the plane feels really good now, that much I have to say. Okay, this time we're gonna go config full. Let's see if that makes much of a change. Unfortunately, I don't have any pitch power tables for config full, but basically what I would expect is that we are going to need a little bit less pitch and a little bit more power. Okay, we are a beam. Starting the timing. So basically, if the pitch target for a config 3 landing is 4 degrees and 50%, then for a config full landing I would expect something like 2.5 or 3 degrees and maybe 54%. That is just a rough guesstimate, however, and might not necessarily be accurate. What some Airbus pilots have told me is for a config full landing you take the gross weight and the first 2 digits, so 58, and then you subtract 3 from that, and that's your target thrust. So we'd be looking at around about 55% of thrust here. Okay, flaps 2. 45 seconds. Let's turn base. Like so. And gear down. Glide slope alive. Okay, on base, let's start a slow final turn, flaps 3 and flaps full. So let's see how that's gonna turn out. We do have a lot more drag, that much I can say already. That speed is certainly a little bit low.
1000.
Bit more bank.
Speed, speed, speed.
Yeah, don't complain, Airbus. You are just fine. Okay, so we have a lot more drag right now. That much I can feel straight away. So let's re-intercept that glide slope. Okay, here we are. So let's see what kind of numbers we end up with. 55 is roughly what I expect. Okay, so we end up with 0 degrees pitch. That is a little bit low. Like, if you watch those A320 approach videos, then you will see that there is, well, there should be a pitch of roughly like 2.5 or so. So this is a little bit low on the pitch. Let's see what kind of thrust setting we end up with. Okay, so that looks almost stable, 53%. So the thrust setting with flap full looks about alright. The pitch is a little bit low.
Minimum 2.
Okay, continue. Let's see how well or not we can hit the aiming point with that. Going below the glide intentionally again.
100.
The target is 50 feet over the piano keys.
50, 40, 30,
Okay,
20.
flare,
Restart.
idle. Ouch. Here we are. Okay, config 3. I gotta do one more. I can't let it end like that. Mantoga SRS go-around track, auto thrust blue. V1, rotate. Positive climb, gear up. Okay, let's start the turn early this time. Auto thrust off, climb thrust, flaps 1. And we'll maintain that throughout the pattern. Okay, so one last time. Activate, confirm approach, direct to Box India. We should be able to select the runway point as well, by the way. Okay, and fly directors off, vert on. Okay, perfect. Then let's go back into the downwind and we'll do one more config full landing, and that's gonna be it for the video then. I have a feeling this has gotten quite a bit longer than I originally anticipated anyway. Okay, so 052. Nice and level. Let's set the runway track already, that's gonna help us later on. So, 232, perfect. Okay then. So, going abeam pretty much now. So let's start the timing. And right now I have my hands completely off the controls, so they did quite a good job improving that. Okay, awaiting 35 seconds for the next notch of flaps, and then at 45 seconds we are going to start our final turn. And with that, by the way, you have not just seen a video on how the new Fenix handles, but I've also taught you how to fly touch and goes. Okay, flaps 2. Thrust back to idle. 45 seconds, here we go. Okay, let's bring it back to 1,600 feet. Like so. Okay then, let's bring in a little bit of a base lag over here. And down there is our airport. Okay, time to turn final. So, gear down. Flaps 3, flaps full. This time I'll try to establish a little bit earlier than previously. Okay, let's not have the speed go totally away. That final turn could certainly have been done a little bit nicer, but that is okay. Okay, so that looks quite good to me now. Okay, perfect. Landing checklist, ecam memo, landing no blue, landing checklist complete. Alright, so with flaps full and flaps 3, there is a huge difference in thrust required over here. It shouldn't be that much. Like the config 3, it seems like the drag for flaps 3 and for the landing gear is just a little bit out of place. Like increase the drag on flaps 3, increase a little bit the drag on the landing gear, and then things would make quite a good impression on me. But now, talking about good impressions, we've got to make one more smooth landing, and this time hopefully right on the aiming point. So let's go a little bit below the glide slope. As I mentioned a couple times now, it is not quite accurate at this airport.
Minimum.
Continue. So we're looking to cross the piano keys at 50. This one is quite a bit more stabilized than the previous, for sure.
50, 40, 30,
Okay, flare.
20, restart, 5.
Come on. Sit down. Okay, so. Spoilers, reverse, manual brakes. Decel. 70 knots. And here we are. That's it, guys. So, park and brake set. One more thing I want to check here. I do, however, believe that the brake temperature simulation is still to be updated for the next version, but that does seem, yeah, it does seem like it. I would expect the brakes to be a little bit warmer after this. But anyway, guys, that's gonna be it. So, what do I think of the flight model on the new fly-by-wire then? Well, the fly-by-wire, especially, is quite good. It does get a little bit, well, it starts to pump a little bit when you bring it onto the extremes of the flight control envelope. But apart from that, the airplane is really doing what it's supposed to do. It's reacting the way it's supposed to react, and they finally made it a little bit more, let's call it a little bit more touchy, so that you can actually make small corrections accurately, which is something that I really missed in the previous versions. So great job on those. Now, if we talk about the handling of the airplane on landing, however, there's a little bit that I do have to say here, in that the A320 family at about 30 feet should introduce a marketable nose-down pitch input. And basically, as you've just seen on my last landing, if you want to rewind again to that, as you've seen on my last landing, that doesn't really happen. So I pulled the side stick after a little bit there. By the way, I don't know where that terrain warning or whatever that was came up from, because there was absolutely no reason for that. But I pulled the side stick back, and you could see how the nose immediately started to rise quite a bit. And, well, let's call it that way. It should be a little bit different there, in that it should just be a little bit smoother, and you should feel that nose down input introduced, so that you use the side stick to basically hang the airplane onto the side stick, if you know what I mean. And then you basically have a very direct control over the pitch attitude. Like that you can fly it down. Now what I felt as well then is that it became a little bit too floaty. So normally you should pitch up by about 2 degrees on the flare with the A320, according to the Flight Crew Techniques manual, and then at that 2 degrees pitch it should settle nicely down onto the runway. This one seems to rather parallel the runway and get into an eternal float unless you lower the nose again a little bit to actively fly it onto the runway. So in my opinion it flares a little bit too strong now. Not sure if that is the infamous ground effect that's overdone or if it is something else. I can tell you honestly, I never felt ground effect in a 737 nor in an A330, so well, we'll just leave it at that. In any case, it does seem like the brake on the landing, you pitch it up 2 degrees and this one seems to react a little bit too strong to that. Now, my only critique here really is with the drag model when you are in config 3 and when you extend the landing gear and when you're flying 250 knots idle descent at level 100. So if those could be corrected, that would be really appreciated, as it would make the airplane quite a bit more realistic to fly. Especially the config 3 landings. That pitch and that power just has to be right. If the pitch and power are off by like a degree and 2 or 3%, that is totally fine. You just can't do any better than that in Microsoft Flight Simulator, despite how much you may try to tune it. But 10% of thrust and like 2 or 3 degrees pitch difference, that is a little bit too much. Developers do have the possibility to correct that within the flight model, and I would absolutely hope that Fenix is going to do just that. Then again, keeping all of that in mind, we do have to keep in mind that we are just talking about the first release version of the Block 1 of Fenix V2 over here. So just like they said themselves, they do expect the need to do a couple more inputs. I do hope that this video is supplying those inputs. I did already raise those support tickets, and with that I'm going to say thank you very much for watching, everyone. Leave a like if you did like the vid. Do leave a comment to let me know what you think about it, and if you think that I have misinterpreted something at some point. And finally, I am very much looking forward to your subscription if you're up for more. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and finally, if you do absolutely love the videos I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again on the next one.